just the way it is, isn't it?
Yeah, the conspiracy theories have gone crazy here.
Yeah,
You know,
everywhere. I think everywhere. And and I think that the challenging thing is there's lots of uh, quite a lot of it. Some of it is presented in a completely mental way, and you just think, yeah, okay, come on. But some of it is presented in a very, that is following particular protocols
yeah,
that make it very accessible and very believable, and using reasonable language and presenting themselves and in a certain way, and various experts. So I mean, I have a friend who's is very much drawn into all of this stuff and quite deeply immersed in it. And there's some of the stuff she sends me, and I kind of think, okay, I mean, I can understand how you get sucked in,
mm,
and and I can understand it's a counter uh, it's a counter argument to what is being presented sort of in the mainstream media.
yeah.
We all know is, depending on who owns the media agency, really. All right, mate, that's enough of that.
Your dog's going mad. Mine's going mad as well in the
Yeah,
corner.
yeah. Well, this one is like, why aren't you paying attention to me?
Yeah.
You know, classic.
Welcome to having children, Dan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is my little fur baby, and he's a fucker. Trust me. Yeah, as much as I love him.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, yeah, but it makes it very challenging. And then there are lots of very vulnerable people who are very susceptible to either end of the spectrum,
Yeah.
and it all gets blown out of proportion, and it's almost like people have forgotten, have lost the ability to critically. Alfie, mate, you're going, yeah. Bye, bye. He'll be back. Don't worry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like they lost the ability to have critical thought. Alfie, dude, please pretend that I have some control over my dog for a minute.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's. I remember, when Brexit happened, I was
Yeah.
teaching a class in South London, and this really lovely Polish woman who used to come to my class, same sort of similar age to me, and we were talking, and she was actually in tears at the time. And okay, I'm just sorry, I can't concentrate while I'm being eaten, so I'm just going to send him outside.
Don't work with children and animals.
Yeah, never. Come on, mate, this way, Alfie. Sorry for being.
Normal service will be resumed shortly.
Right. Oh, I just had to unload him on Tanya.
Yeah.
um, yeah, and I remember talking to her. She was in tears about it, and she was saying, "Oh, I feel really frightened in this country now. I don't think anyone wants me to be here. And we were, I sort of talked her down a little bit, and she was saying that the thing that's really freaked her out. She grew up in communist Poland, pre-transition and during the transition, and it was crazy and very frightening. But she said the communist politicians or the estate, um, they did exactly what Farage, Trump, I'm sure it's happening in Ireland as well, are doing. They put these strap lines, these headlines, are very convincing. Like, we will, stop immigration.
Mm.
It's a fantasy. You might be able to control it a little bit,
Yeah.
but you're never going to stop people crossing over on a boat.
Mm.
but you know what I mean. They basically they lie, but in very convincing uh, short sentences, so people don't actually think around the edges. That's what it seems to me. And it's like, this is how it is. We're the great. Make Britain great. Make America great again. You know, it's like meaningless. It means nothing. It was never there. You know, Britain was never great, other
Mm.
than media. America was never great. There's always been nuances and
Yeah, it's funny.
periods.
It's funny you say that because there was an Irish client of mine said like how arrogant that Britain should call themselves Great Britain. What makes them great? And I said it's the whole colonial uh, mindset, And I think Brexit was really driven, it was really like pushed and driven. This idea of, we're going to be a sovereign nation again.
It's
But really, if you look at Britain now, I mean, I fly into Manchester, I don't recognize it. I don't recognize Manchester anymore. I don't even know what country I'm in when I land. And I know that might sound racist, but I just can't figure it out. I
mm,
get one thing in London, but in Manchester it's much smaller and it's just overrun,
mm.
overrun. And I think the world is going to be constantly shifting and moving and changing and people moving places where they live.
It's always happened though, mate. That's
Yeah.
the thing. It's like, you know, in it's always happened, and there's and that inevitably initially there's like you know conflict or rubbing up the wrong way to various cultures, rubbing each other up the wrong way, and then it sort of, you know, then it settles down. The bridges are built. It settles down. It becomes a new norm. I mean, it's happened. There have been so many migrations specifically into London, you know, because it started with the Huguenots during all the religious persecution in France, and then the Jews, the Irish,
Mm.
the Eastern Europeans, the Bangladeshis. You know, there's been successive waves, and after, despite, you know, the difficulty of racism and all of the stuff that comes with it, eventually in those communities there's an equilibrium is written as reached as people get more understanding and less resistant. It's just change, and from my perspective, even though sometimes it's challenging,
Mhm.
certainly with certain cultures and certain places that people have come from, because it's all like they're stepping out of, you know, the 17th century or something, and then arriving in the 20. Do you know what I mean? Or the Middle
Yeah.
Ages, arriving here, and there's a culture clash, and it can be quite difficult. But if you if you have any strong connection or belief in the Tao, it's just change. It's just change. The only problem are people thinking it's a problem,
Mm. Mm.
because it's just changed. There has always been migration. The Celts came from fucking somewhere deep in Central Europe before
Yeah.
they're in Britain. Before that, there was a culture already established here that got pushed
Mm.
into the margins, you know, and there was probably culture before then that got pushed down.
Yeah. I mean, half of UK or well, England was Danish at one point. Um, it's mad. I
Yeah,
mean, like I was saying to a friend of mine, he was saying, "Oh, 800 years of British oppression in Ireland," and I said, "Hold on a minute, wind that back a bit because the Normans invaded 1066.
yeah,
They pretty much ruled the roost with us for about 100, 200 years
yeah,
before they decided to enter, maybe 100 years, and then decided, oh, we'll have a crack at Ireland.
yeah,
So really you're looking at the French, a mix between French and Viking,
yeah, yeah,
Germanic
yeah,
style,
yeah,
Nordic
yeah.
races. I mean, that's what the Normans were, weren't they? They were Nordic, French, and because they were taller, they were stronger. They ate. They had a more
Mm,
organized armies. They had a better diet. They lived in a larger farming communities with organized structure. They were always going to beat us in battle. we were still in a very feudal nation where
mm,
you're the king of East Anglia and a king of West Sussex and a king of Cornwall and a prince of
mm,
blah, you know. So we
mm,
were all these had these little sort of small sovereign counties,
mm.
and then you just had these one or two kings that ruled massive lands, massive swathes, just organized. It was, I suppose, the very first form of organized warfare, you know. Um,
Yeah, it
and
was. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, not the very first. I'm sure if we go back 40,000 years ago, there were some incredible battles happening in Asia and India and places like that.
yeah.
But do you
In
know what I mean? For
Yeah,
us,
yeah, 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 and it's certainly. I mean, Britain had, you know, uh, Britain had, what was it, 400 years of Roman
mm,
domination. Then the Angles and Saxons came in and dominated. Then they had the vision of England, and England. The name England comes from the Angles, and it was the the Britons here. They were
mm,
like the strangers, the
mm,
strangers, and they were, and the Saxons, the
mm,
Angles, Saxons, and the Jutes were
mm,
also Danes
mm,
and North Germans,
mm,
and then the Vikings came, and then we had two successive waves here. The Danes more in the mid and west,
mm,
south of Britain, and the Norwegians more in the north. The Swedes went the other way; they went into the Baltics, so they
mm,
tended to go east. So we had,
mm,
but and King Harold was a cousin of Harold Hardrada,
mm,
who invaded, in before um, William,
mm.
who was also a cousin.
Yeah,
They're all related. The royal families of Europe
mm,
have been related since the
yeah,
beginning of
yeah,
time, and it's just the whole idea of nation is such a joke. And I mean, I can understand because of history and the way it's taught. I can understand any person in Ireland or Scotland or Wales or various parts of England being feeling like they have a grudge against the English,
mm,
but it's such a misnomer because there are Britain or England was also invited into Ireland by some groups. There were some people, some communities that wanted them there. There's
mm,
plenty of others that didn't. There's a load of stuff that's fucked up. I'm not justifying it at
mm,
all. I just think you've got to have a balanced view of these things. And
mm.
even here, it's like history is history. It's made up stories presented
Yeah.
in a certain way and then taught as fact, you know.
I have
And
a client who a history teacher for many years. He's retired now. He's in his 70s, but he was saying there's a few times he got pulled up as a young teacher. You know, you're not following the curriculum.
uh, yeah,
And he said, well, the curriculum isn't correct history. It's the history that the government
yeah,
want to enforce. Now, the one thing I will say is that we in Britain are looking now, what is it? We're at 2025. So I'm here properly since 97. So 28 years this summer. 28
wow,
years. Just a few weeks before Diana was killed.
yeah,
Um,
wow,
but yeah, it's 28 years, and I can genuinely say that we are definitely in England or Britain. We are what do you call it? Brainwashed.
yeah,
Saying brainwashing happens here too.
yeah, yeah,
The state-run media and
yeah,
a lot of propaganda on back around in and around the government and who's great and look at us and look at what we're doing. But I mean, you know, and I know there was probably 2 or 3 pages at most dedicated to Ireland in the history books that we read at school.
Yeah, yeah,
It was in and around the famine and the loss of people and the
yeah,
potato, but it was the potato blight. It
yeah,
wasn't called famine. They called
yeah,
it this horrendous potato blight,
yeah, yeah.
as if it was some kind of affliction by God and the people. Um, and meanwhile, we were sat on mountains of grain and corn and butter and milk, pretty much similar to the EU
Mm,
butter mountains we had in the 80s.
yeah.
And yeah, there were genuinely people, and it was. It's the irony is most of the top Irish rebels um, were actually more heavily linked to the British Crown. They were
Mm,
Protestant in faith, and
mm,
that they were landowners. And I think they just were like, we're sick of paying, we're sick of having to bow down to what
mm,
the Crown wants.
mm.
Let's go for our independence. They probably realistically were looking for more money and more power. They wanted true control of their land.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think they riled up the locals who were predominantly Catholic in their
Mm,
religion. And without being discriminatory, were probably lesser educated,
mm. Yeah.
more.
Well, all people, hardly anyone anywhere was educated, were they
Yeah.
really?
And
And
so it's very easy to stand on a rostrum and
yeah,
talk about how great Ireland is and how we should fight for our freedom and
mm,
800 years of oppression.
mm,
And the people preaching this were actually just doing it to serve their own purposes. But it's not sold that way. Um, I mean, I speak to this historian; he's incredible, and the stories, the stuff that the interweaving of agreements and counter agreements, and
yeah,
actually Irish politicians sitting around the table with British politicians to weave a narrative so
yeah,
both parties get what they want at the behest of people's freedom and
yes.
sovereignty.
I think that's the thing. You just actually said it in a nutshell, really. That because the same happened in Scotland.
Mm.
The
Yes.
aristocrats were all linked to the king. I mean, at one time, the King of England was also the King of Scotland, and he was Scottish by birth, but they all spoke French.
Yeah, they're
Anyway,
all
you
Latin
know,
educated,
yeah. And it's like, that what they do is, well, in those days, they sort of, way back, they basically coerce people. People were owned. So if you lived on some lord's land, then and he
right?
went to fuck someone up, you went with them.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
didn't have a
You
choice.
got paid, right, to
Yeah,
go.
but you had no choice. You didn't
Yeah,
know. It was just like they're the enemy. All right, point me at them. You know.
yeah.
And so all the people who suffer are not, generally speaking, the people who suffer most and experience most loss and are the people, not the leaders
No.
or the hierarchy. There's various levels where you're being coerced and coerced and coerced, but and the people of whatever side of any
Mm,
conflict are being told, well, we're doing this for you.
mm,
It's for your benefit, and even in the day, like you say, during the famine, when Britain, England in particular, was sitting on mountains of grain and food and not sending it, refused. I think there was actually a political debate in the House of Parliament where they went, no, we'll wait, because it was a great way to reduce
control.
people to really need, but also in the countrysides of in the north, in the west, southwest, people
Mm,
were starving. People weren't feeling the bounty.
mm,
They couldn't afford to buy food. They couldn't afford to buy meat,
mm.
for example. So it's all it. There are so many nuances to all this stuff, and when we go into historical stuff, it's very it's very easy to get drawn into goodies and baddies,
Yes.
and we all that, we were the downtrodden, we were the goodies, they're the enemy, they were the baddies. And it's like, there's a God, what's it? It's a line. I think it's actually a line in a song that I heard recently, and it's a conversation with God. And in the context of the song, and he's this guy who's singing the song is asking God, if you're who, what's your purpose? It's all about questioning, is there a supreme being that's fine and organizes stuff? And if someone is fighting in your name, they're a hero, but someone who's fighting in the name of another god is a terrorist. But in their eyes, they're a hero to their god. They're like,
Yes.
it's all manipulation. Some of it's quite very subtle and very nuanced, and is kind of in our DNA. And some of it is well nowadays, I think, because of social media, it's a bit like a sledgehammer.
I'm going to send you an image later after the conversation, and it was sent to me by a friend, and it was this latest technology LiDAR, where it's like a laser infrared radar that they can fly a plane or a large drone, and they flew over the savanna plains of Wyoming. And, they were, I don't know what they were looking for. They were looking for some kind of native settlement or something like that. And then this thing can penetrate, I think, a kilometer.
Wow.
Into the ground. And when they went over, it was just like rolling hills, beautiful sort of what you'd imagine cowboys to be kind of pulling their horses and wagons across.
Yeah.
And as they went over the top of it, they saw all these geometric structures, pyramids, things that look like they should belong in Machu Picchu or
wow.
And I'll send you the image. And they're like, this is the second strange discovery we've had this year. They did it again. I think it was in one of the pyramids in Africa. Don't think it was the famous pyramids. It was another one. They found these structures that were coiled in structure that goes 600 meters. That's kind of attached underneath the pyramid and goes 600 meters to the ground. And of course, the head of Egyptology there, he was Egyptian. I can't remember his name, but he just was like denying this is all fake. And
okay, I think I know the guy. Yeah,
and it's like, I think there's two things going on there. It's if I admit that I'm wrong, I lose my power, position.
Yeah.
Or I've been told
Yeah.
I'm a part of a structure of mechanisms that is knowledge is power. Treat people like mushrooms.
Yeah.
In the dark and feed them shit.
Yeah.
That whole like, or we start to join the dots and we go, oh, this civilization occurred here and here and here and here. We're going to start scratching our heads going, but surely Christopher Columbus was the founder of the modern world. Like, well, that's the Vatican's story,
Yeah.
We went to the Rome, myself and Chief, many, many years ago. And we had this ex-Swiss guard who did the tour guide, and there was this woman I think she was from Essex. She goes, when are we going to have a look at the vaults? Can we go down and have a look at the vaults? And he goes, madam, you don't want to go down there. Oh, well, I'll come here for the vaults. And he's like, trust me, there are stuff down there you don't want to see. And he says, I've been down there. It's like, yeah, and in the end, she gave him a big hug and a kiss, and she's like, yeah, I think this probably was stuff down there that would change my view of the church. And he's like, yeah, so it's partly the reason why I've been barred 7 times from being a tour guide.
Yeah. Well, there's that all that stuff that came out, was it 2 or 3 years ago, isn't it? When someone went down and they filmed it, and they filmed the first religious images in Rome. They think they were the first Christian religious images in Rome, and they were very clearly women, and they were very clearly dressed in what became considered bishops' robes.
Mm.
meaning that they were high level within the church,
Mm.
within the Christian belief system at that time. There wasn't a church at that time, but within the system.
Mm.
And, it was a it was an amazing. Oh, it was actually a nun. It was a nun who was doing it. I can't remember her name. She was quite famous on TV for 5 minutes, and she was sort of unpicking all. It was all around women's ordination and stuff like that, and
Yeah, I
why.
think I know the person. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was amazing. It was, but it's still there was no comment from the hierarchy, no comment from the church other than it doesn't exist. That's just whatever.
Yeah.
We just ignore it. It will go away. She'll go away, or we'll find a way of moving her to a nunnery, or suggest she doesn't do TV anymore, or whatever it was. But and there's a lot down there, and obviously there's a lot of it's much older than when the Christians arrived, but it's a very interesting dynamic, particularly at the moment. I think with all of these, I don't really know what they are. Right wing, they tend to be right wing American pundits that go to students. There's one particularly well known. I've seen him quite a lot on various things. I think his name's Charlie Kirk, and he goes to American universities and he has these conversations
Yeah.
coming from a Christian fundamentalist perspective,
Mm.
and he has conversations with people about being trans, gay, blah blah blah, why women should be allowed to go to university.
Mm.
They should be allowed to go to university because it's a good place to meet a husband, not to study anything of any value, but to meet a husband.
Mm.
That's and then he backs it up with various texts from the Bible and blah, blah. Well, this year he was in the UK.
Mm.
He was in Oxford
Mm.
and Cambridge, and
Right.
I watched the interviews he had with the students, and it's all kind of set up. It's like
Oh, they're only going to edit out. They're going to edit out all the stuff where he's beaten, and
no,
only
no, no, no. He was completely these students
yeah,
very different from American students.
yeah, sure,
They're
more intelligence. Sorry, American.
a very specific kind of academic mind,
Yeah,
and religious scholars. They weren't
they
uh,
weren't pushovers
no,
because
and
we have history in the West here, in this part of Europe. We have that.
yeah, yeah,
A
yeah,
1,000 years of medieval history and
yeah,
or
and
not, but transition through the ages.
yeah, and they painted the floor with him. It was really interesting because he's quite charming,
Yeah,
quite handsome. He's a kind of tall man. He's he stays cool and calm, and despite whatever
get
bullshit
confidence
stuff,
in himself.
yeah, like and it's like this, and I have the God behind me, so
Yeah.
I can't be wrong.
Mm.
And one of the conversations in particular was amazing. It was this religious studies student who debated with and just tore his argument to pieces. And he started to get, what was interesting was to see him lose his cool, and he started to get quite angry and quite shouty, and
Mm.
then he resorted to just looking at his phone and not having eye contact with the guy who was
Right.
debating with him. It was very, very interesting, and I think there is. I mean, he's funded by someone. He's not.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean. There is a particular narrative that is
There's
that.
somebody else like him as well out there, but I can't remember his name. But I've seen, it's very similar.
Well, there, Jordan, is it Jordan Peters, the older Canadian guy?
And yeah,
Peterson. Is it Peterson?
Peterson, yeah.
Yeah,
I
he's
don't know if he's funded because I know he was kicked out of university, but he's a wealthy man in his own right. He has several.
yeah, and he's I in the early days I watched a few interviews with him, and I thought, well, actually, he's speaking a lot of sense, but he just now seems like an angry, bitter old man and can't deal with anyone who questions him. You know,
Yeah,
who questions his statements.
yeah,
Without. I mean, this is the difference between what happens in Europe, like you say, and what happens in America, because there is that intellectual difference in certain areas. You know,
I think fundamentally he's probably smarter than most people. I mean, he's a Canadian,
yeah,
and he'd worked. I think where he fell down was he'd had health problems,
yeah, he had a lot of health
all the
problems.
medication.
Yeah,
He was burning the candle at both ends, and he had a meltdown, I believe. I think it was in Russia.
yeah,
There, he was coming off various medications that he was on, and I think, you know, for him, I mean, I can't speak for Charlie Kirk, but Peterson, his wife had contracted cancer several times and
mm,
battled and fought through that, and his daughter was pretty much bits of her body were falling off because of degenerative arthritis in her body.
mm,
So he was dealing with all of that. Like he couldn't be right in the head. And
no,
then he was being attacked because at that point when he rose, he was in the middle of the extreme left.
mm,
He was constantly being attacked for his viewpoints.
mm,
But I've read his book. In the beginning, I kind of had the same view. Now I don't listen to him because I always feel sorry for him. I
yeah,
always feel like he's sad. He's a very sad person.
yeah,
Not a happy man. He's not a
no,
happy man. He
no,
always sounds when he talks like he's in pain.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
In pain, he's suffering. He's suffering, and he's leaning a lot on his religious scripture.
mm,
And I presume that gives him strength. I've nothing against
mm,
that.
no,
Plenty of people do that, but it's just not for me. Uh,
no,
the other person I've gone off quite a bit is I used to be a fan about 10 years ago of Joe Rogan, just because of the martial arts aspect.
yeah, yeah, me too. I used to think I quite liked him because he was quite, you know,
Directness, very
he was
direct.
quite good at, yeah, and presenting different.
Yeah, but now I don't know. It's just the same stuff all the time, and
Well,
the
he's
same
gone
things
nuts. I
repeat.
think he's gone nuts. I think there's something that happens in America when you get to a certain, for a lot of people anyway, when you get to a certain level of success, and I don't know whether it's like fear of losing your pile or whatever or something, but certainly there seems to be a shift from a more balanced view, centrist view, whether you sometimes swing a bit left, sometimes swing a bit right, depending on what's
I mean,
being said.
I do admire him for the things he said during COVID. I thought it was the antidote to a
Mm,
lot of the extreme narrative the other way.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think like always maintaining that center line.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, I've gone
yeah.
on, I've
As
gone
soon
on.
as soon as he sort of advocated, he came out for Trump. For me, that was just like, okay, mate, you've tipped over to the dark side.
I think he's actually changed his tune. That's one thing I do admire about him. He's prepared to pivot. I think
Mm,
recent
yeah, yeah,
events and Elon and all this, I think what I'm noticing is kind of like taking a step back from that and going, I'm not really sure.
mm,
And I think one thing I will admire is he is prepared to pivot. He is prepared to change his mind.
yeah, yeah.
A lot of people like just they will stiff up a lip and just keep going.
Mm, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, definitely.
so I think yeah, he's
Yeah,
kind of jumped off that a little bit. But I
yeah,
think it was just probably all the razzmatazz and the glory of actually having.
yeah. And success. I mean, success. He's one of the most successful. Runs one of the most successful podcast shows, and then obviously all his
Oh, he's
martial
the
arts.
biggest in the world. I think
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
100
mean,
million
it's
he got from Spotify.
yeah,
100 million. It's like the dude
yeah,
doesn't have to work.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's
I was big into Rich Roll. I don't know if you watch Rich Roll. I was really big into him. He
yeah. I
would be
don't think I
more
know.
liberal, very liberal. I mean, Joe Rogan actually was a liberal, and then he's
Yeah,
seems gone a little bit more to the middle and the right.
yeah,
But yeah, Rich Roll was good. But the thing, no disrespect to vegans, but he was kept pushing the vegan narrative on every podcast, and I was like, okay, that's fine, I get it,
mm,
but
mm,
like there needs to be balance. You can advocate obviously for plant-based food. You can advocate for. I mean, I had some really good ideas in around cheese and how to eat cheese and using nut cheese and all these things I thought were great. And the barefoot running, I
mm,
love that.
mm,
Swimming
mm,
and all that, I loved
mm,
all of that. And the fact that he recovered as from an alcoholism to become at the age of 40 one of the America's fittest men. Like
mm,
absolute mess. to like doing the Ultraman, which is just a
I think you
phenomenal
know
race.
him, actually. Now you've said all this stuff. Yeah, I think it kind of definitely.
Yeah, and also I really love watching him, Tom Billio then as well. Uh, I used to enjoy his, which I think I can't remember the name of his podcast. Um, and another person who transformed. But I think there's a lot of these people have made it on. There's a lot of luck involved. There's a lot of
Yeah,
timing.
yeah, yeah,
Has to
yeah,
be a big story. Has to be a big story of transformation.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It's true.
I knew an Irish guy here who runs a small podcast, and he would follow trends to try and get more followers. And there was this thing, the Liver King. I don't know if you remember this guy.
Mm.
He's like eating raw
Oh
liver.
yeah, it's all lies, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all lies. But this guy was obviously believing the lies, and then he
Mm,
was
yeah, yeah,
filming himself eating raw liver. And I was thinking, like, what are you doing?
yeah. Exactly.
Let that guy do his thing, and you stick to what you're best at.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah. I mean, there's a thing. I mean, I spoke to a couple of my colleagues that are fairly high up in, would be considered very respected acupuncturists
Mm,
and
mm,
they all said to me, it's better to be well known amongst your peers than to be famous. Because when you're famous, it brings so much
mm,
trappings
mm,
that can kind of suck you in.
mm,
Um, I've been
mm.
following Lee Holden. Do you remember Lee Holden?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
He was a student of Mantak Chia,
yeah.
and this is only starting to come out. Before that, the story was fairly well hidden, and that,
Mm,
consciously burnt out when he found Qigong.
mm,
And not that it matters who he was a student of, but I just found it interesting that, as he's getting older, he's just more and more of his life is being shown. And he works as a famous Qigong person online because he's tall, he's American, he's handsome, he's
mm,
blonde, he's blue
mm,
eyes,
mm,
the American dream.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but on camera.
yeah.
Um, and like there was times when I'd look at these people and thinking, then you have somebody like Bruce Francis, who is not tall, not blonde. Certainly, I don't think is handsome.
He's
And
he's a New Yorker,
yeah,
abrasive New Yorker.
yeah, and you know, but he has this big talks himself up, real big.
Mm,
I
mm,
mean, his ego could fill the room. I don't care if he's watching this; he's probably not, but I don't care. Come and find me.
yeah.
Um, and it's like, um, it's just, I felt like I've had people who've gone and trained with him and said, like, he's definitely skilled, he's
Mm,
definitely talented,
mm.
but it's all wrapped up in I know more than you do sort of thing.
Yeah, I know people who've trained. I've known people who've trained with him as well. In fact, one of the guy I used to train with in Brick Lane uh, was very close with Bruce Francis for quite a while,
Mm.
and hosted him in the UK a number of times, and and ultimately he's kind of separated from him because he, he's an extremely skilled practitioner of martial arts in his own right. So, and his thing was, well, he is genuine. He has a lot of knowledge, a lot of skill,
Mm.
but it's very diffused, and it's one of those things which frustrates me with some teachers. I've experienced it in a way with some very traditional Chinese teachers where they tell you, this is this and this, but you never actually practice that. You practice quite often very basic stuff, and I know we all have to learn basics in order to prepare our body to progress through various stages. But there's a very different kind of psychology between uh, that which is a very patriarchal kind of controlling or way of controlling, keeping your students hungry and controlling them,
Mm.
and then other ways like particularly with my Silat teacher, that you could have a very, not in the class necessarily, but you could have a very honest conversation with him about arts, about the martial arts, about energy, about, you know, his progression, you know, and feel like, okay, there are these levels, but they are attainable, and it's not all kind of mystical woo woo. You know, there is obviously the mystical aspect to these arts when you look at them in a certain way.
Yeah.
But all martial arts in essence come from a very practical standpoint, and that is being able to physically defend yourself and your community. And traditionally in China, most martial arts teachers were migrant, not settled. So they would move from community to community, teaching bits here and there to get food, to get lodgings. They might stay for a couple of months, they might, you know, and then would move on. And another teacher would come in. So they get a bit, and that's when the styles started to then be formed, because in the communities they needed a more settled approach. So they would kind of absorb, and then that became that area style. You know, and then it, you know, and that sort of stayed pretty much the model until now.
Yeah.
But it was very much driven by a sort of patriarchal, the kind of Confucian patriarchal ideology. And I think it's quite fascinating. This is quite new to me. So you probably already know this, but for me, this was a bit of a revelation. I kind of knew it, but didn't know for sure. But anyway, I was talking to I've always had this thing about yin and yang, and there being a sort of male, female. One of the categories of, you know, yang being more male but with female within it, yin being more female with male within it, you know. And I've never wholly felt that was honest or true. I always had a bit of suspicion. And one of the things in quite a lot of traditional Chinese martial arts, when you end a session, or you know, which is, it's very common to bring your hands onto your dantian. And they always say, well, men should put one hand first and women put the other, and blah, 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 you know. So if you're a male, you put, or whatever, I can't even remember, right hand, think down first and left on top. And if you're female, you put left.
A lot of confusion over that, yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, and I thought, okay, this is quite interesting. So I sort of played around with it myself just to see how it felt in my body. I used it as a kind of meditation. And psychos back. And there was no, I didn't notice any difference at all.
Yeah.
Hey, Alfie, are you just a bit excited? I just go, hang on a minute. Let's try and distract him with a bit of this instead of biting me. This is
her leg. Give him a leg to chew on.
Yeah. Anyway, so I was kind of thinking about this. I was having a discussion with one of my students who's he's actually ordained as both a Tibetan monk and a Zen monk. And I was talking to him about this and sort of feeling, okay, this is, you know, I'm not, this is what I think, you know, just chatting about stuff. And he said, well, you know, originally, the categorization of yin being, I know he's psycho today, and yang, actually, where it became male and female, actually came in to Chinese culture through a directive of one of the emperors, and it was driven by Confucius and adopted because Confucius had very much this idea of order, and this is the way societies should be built, and men should know their place and women should know their place, and that's how you have harmony. and balance, so it was very much driven by that. Pre-Confucian era, actually it was switched, and the female was considered yang and the male was considered yin. But in Confucian ideology, that presented males in a way that he didn't feel was quite right for.
Yeah.
But there's another twist to this as well, that the first ever pictorial representation of the yin and yang symbol actually comes from Tibet, and it comes from the Bon tradition. And there's a monk who's currently wandering around the Himalayas, who I'm sort of in contact with, who's studying all of this stuff. And so the first ever symbol of yin and yang was from the Bon tradition, which is a shamanic. I know there's lots of similar connections to Tibetan Buddhism, but at its heart, it's a shamanic belief system. And I don't know quite why you're so manic, Alfie. No, Alfie. He's still very young, this one.
Yeah.
And originally, so the first ever yin and yang symbol was from the Bon tradition. It moved over the mountains filtered down into China, and it became the symbol that we're more familiar with. It was originally a circle with black and white lines in.
Yeah, I think I've seen that in the Margus of Java's book at the end.
Yeah, I think it is there actually. Yeah, and then it became the more familiar one, the more kind of
It matched, shall we say, the farming community ideal.
Yeah. But
it's
originally
based on a cart, how you construct a wagon wheel.
A wagon wheel, yeah. But originally, there was no gender assigned to yin and yang at all.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That was a later adaptation.
Somebody told me like that Taiji wheel. Yeah, it's like only 1,500 years old.
Yeah.
It's old, but it's not ancient.
Yeah. That's the thing with all of this stuff that we take. It doesn't change the fact that there is value in pursuing something in a certain way, or certainly from a perspective of treating people, and because you're always, as a traditional medicine practitioner, you understand that there are nuances to everything. So, but and it is quite good to encourage to treat some people with the understanding of herbs and acupuncture with give them more yang and more of a boost, and for some to reduce that. There are lots of nuances. But it's like we were saying at the beginning, it's just having the ability to critically think and understand that essentially patriarchal ideology, which has come down through the centuries into these arts, is a useful starting point. But at the same time, we also have to expand our minds and to think outside the box. For some people, when you learn about this stuff initially, that is thinking outside the box. That's taking you out of your regular stuff and thinking about this and that, and then it's amazing. You have this connection to energy that you may have sensed but not really connected with before. You have different philosophies and ways of viewing the world and nature, and that can be really expansive. But there's also there's a certain point where there's an expansion beyond that, and I feel I'm certainly someone who's been in at various times been quite like, oh no, it's like this is the right way, that's the because this is ancient wisdom you know, and it is ancient wisdom, but it's also ancient wisdom that's in its own way as nuanced as modern wisdom is today.
Yeah.
There's much more, and like a lot of things, particularly in Asia and at that time, well, around the world actually, the only people that were really educated were the elites and maybe religious communities. You know, most people were struggling to survive, you know, in a field.
Yeah. I
And
remember when one of my Chinese medicine teachers, I don't know if he's still alive now, but he talked an awful lot about Egyptian culture, you know. And so he said that I suppose we could call it the pharaoh culture in
yeah,
terms of them coming in as a ruling class, taking over the previous class that was there. They were, he believes, from what he studied, they were the first group of people to do the whole right and wrong, justice, injustice, you know, and they realized it was a way of controlling the people. So,
yeah,
you know, it's this idea of there's consequences to doing bad things. I mean, obviously we always had some sense of justice, but this then was like an organized,
yeah, yeah,
like the all-seeing eye, you're being watched by some
yeah,
God, you're
yeah,
being judged by some God or some higher power. You have to be a good.
yeah.
Then they could enforce the rules based on them being in contact with a higher force.
Exactly. If you know if your position is ordained by God, well, that you know that's quite convincing to a lot of people. You know that it's like, well, you know,
Yeah.
we have the power, the bling to back it up, so you better listen.
Yeah.
I mean, the first ever, actually predating uh, the hieroglyphics, the first there's a clay tablet that was found in one of the cities in Mesopotamia, and on that tablet are the first ever rules and regulations for how people should behave is written, and it's the first time currently. I mean, then I'm sure there are older versions, but it was at a time when there weren't very many settled communities in the world. The main population, human population of the planet, was still hunter gatherer. So these were quite unique in that sense, and it gives very clear indications about how men should behave and how women should behave. And it's the first time that rights of women are being taken and starting to be taken away, and they then can become the property of their husband. They're not, you know, before that they believed that there was much more equality. It would have been individual rather than communities saying women aren't allowed to do this. They aren't allowed to speak against their husband. They can't, you know, if their husband commits a crime, they can put the woman up to take punishment. You know, it's just really quite revealing. And there's lots of, you know, if a woman has an argument with her husband, she should have her teeth smashed out.
Well,
yeah, I mean,
but look at the Christian Bible. I mean, in its various forms. I mean, in the early Genesis and all that, and it's like it was the female that took the apple. You know, went against God's wishes. So it's like women have been set up from day one as antagonists,
it's
ruiner of society, and
yeah,
and that's a burden. That's a big burden for women to carry. And therefore, you shall suffer with periods and pain, and childbirth shall be painful. And imagine if that is a belief system that goes back several thousand years, and that's running through your community. It's going to eventually create pain, harm, and suffering. Used to say that childbirth in 6,000 years ago wasn't as harrowing or as painful. I mean, I don't know. Possibly it was.
we don't know. I mean,
I mean, I've worked in Chinese hospitals where I see
Mm.
people's level of pain tolerance is so much higher.
Mm.
And I'd ask like, why is this? And this is cultural, it's just cultural. Like
Mm.
pain is just a thing to be accepted. It's
Mm.
not a thing to be
Yeah,
fought against.
yeah,
It's part
yeah,
of the process
yeah,
suffering.
yeah. And to a certain extent, although I think painkillers are very useful at different
Yeah.
times, but as communities in the West, we've been sort of we've been weakened by you know being able to pop over and buy your Anadin when you've got a headache or a backache or this and that. So we some of the resilience, maybe not that I don't think anyone should
Yeah.
live in pain just to be
It's just we lean on it too much.
yeah, and that and that like antibiotics, of course, that's creating huge problems now. In
Yeah.
so sorry, I'm moving around. I'm
That's
still
all right.
kind of
You
holding
pass.
onto his chew as he's yeah. But I mean, Anthony, we always have these amazing conversations.
Yeah.
But
I want to know. I know you're doing your teacher training,
yeah,
and I know you've been doing running workshops. But
mm,
when can we get you to Ireland? Because I have a group of people here that are interested in learning Qigong, and I thought if we
mm,
could do a collaboration, open collaboration. There isn't any. There's a couple of schools here. I don't really know them that well. I maybe know one person, but I still don't know them right well. There's
mm,
obviously a friend of mine who's running regular weekly classes, bi-weekly classes. Their emphasis is very much on Hanyang Ruyi,
mm.
which is a medical Qigong, which um, I helped to get into Ireland. And
Okay, okay,
uh,
yeah. I think you've shown a few bits on your various
yeah, and then
posts.
they're running with it and it works for them.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm more sort of, I feel my role is to share
Mm.
the things that I think work very well.
Yeah, yeah. So it's
Also,
kind of empowering people, isn't it?
yeah, that's my role is to
Yeah, yeah,
guide.
yeah. I mean, I feel like that too. I feel very much like, the real benefit of internal work, qigong or going a bit deeper, neigong, is that you're actually giving power to people to help themselves and also to recognize when you need help and support. It's not just about I can do it all on my own. Sometimes we need we need help. We need body work, or we need healing, or we need herbs or something else because
Yeah,
it's we haven't quite got the tools
exactly. But speaking of
or yeah. Okay.
herbs, just arrived for myself.
Fantastic.
I've learned over the years, like reach out and ask for help. Like when you're
Mm,
not getting anywhere with the stuff you're doing,
mm,
it's okay
mm.
to ask for help. I mean,
Yeah, completely.
it was a miracle to heal myself from migraines, debilitating migraines.
Yeah, yeah.
But there gets to a point where you don't have all the answers, you know,
Mm,
and regardless of the thousands of hours of training,
mm.
it's nice to just go to someone and say, "Hey, I have a problem. Do you have a solution? A possible solution?"
Yeah, I think it's really it's a sign of kind of wisdom and intelligence because we certainly in your field in my field you know so much and you can assess people, you can read people, you can the, it's always much more challenging doing it yourself. You can do it to a certain extent. I think we all can do it to a certain extent, but
Yeah,
we also have blind spots, and we also uh, can get well. I don't know about you.
get
I
in the
can
way.
talk about me. I can get very kind of do I go this way? Do I go this way? And then end up debating with myself what actually I need to do, and either do a kind of cobble together something that's a bit of a mix of everything, or don't. you know. And I just think it's important to step outside yourself, and also I think it's quite courageous as well when you say, okay, I'm not managing this.
Mm.
So it would just be good to have a perspective, an external perspective,
Yeah.
to see how it goes, and
I
then
also like homework. I see it as like,
yeah,
give me some homework to
you
work with.
learn,
You
don't
know?
you? You learn.
At the moments for me, you can't really see it, but some strange rash on my that it's come and gone over the last just
Okay,
half a year, and
yeah.
it possibly could be. I think it's linked to my digestion more and more so. But so I've been intermittent fasting this last week and just
Mm,
started eating around 5 o'clock in the evening.
mm,
And with a lot of supplements to just not to replace anything, but just to support
mm,
that process. And
mm.
said, it's just I need to get on top of it because the reason why I could be tired is not just the long hours I do, but it could be this as well, right? It,
Yeah, absolutely. And start, things change. As we change, stuff changes, and what
yeah,
your body is able to cope with. Sometimes, like anything, if you're over exercising one bit of your body, at some point it's going to wear out or you'll get some kind of injury or you'll strain a muscle or something like that, and then it's like it's the same. We're the same, and I think we have a local herbalist not too far away from me it's an acupuncture clinic, and it's that's amazing. That for me, that hands down has been apart from the guy that I worked, the Chinese guy that I worked with in Leytonstone when I was still in London. This has been the most accessible. It's very kind of modern in a way, the way they approach treatment and herbalism, and it's quite slick. I mean, they make it really user friendly in the sense that I've spent at least about a third of my life boiling herbs.
mm,
Do you know what I mean?
mm,
And all of that. But what they do, which is that they make up a prescription for you,
mm.
and then depending on how long they think that you should be that before they check you again. It's initially, well, when I first went, I think it was actually for a week, and then I went back, and then for another week, and then it was sort of 2 weeks, and then 3 weeks, and then a month, and then okay, you're done,
Mm.
kind of thing for now. But they actually have a facility where they prepare your remedy for you. It's all vacuum sealed in sachets that are you
Yeah,
know biodegradable, and basically you get each one dose in one sachet. So if you're on 2 sachets a day or 3 sachets a day or whatever it is,
mm.
you'll get that many sachets. So you just have to pour it into a cup and drink it. You can heat it if you want to,
Mm.
or you can have it cold depending on how you feel,
Mm.
or what you're doing. Generally, sometimes they will say, no, this one you have to warm up, but
Mm.
most of the ones I've had, they've been, well, it's already been warmed up. Don't warm it up again. Just
Yeah,
drink it. Maybe not straight from the fridge, but don't drink it cold, but
temperature. Mm.
room temperature. Yeah, and it's amazing. It is a whole. The guy is what's his name? Mazin. He's God. I can send you. I'll send you
Yeah, send it on to me. I'll have a look because
yeah,
I'm always
because
interested in how
the guy is really interesting. I mean, he travels all over the world.
Mm.
He's an expert in skin pathologies and uh, autoimmune disease
Mm.
is his real thing, and he goes everywhere talking. He even has they send Chinese students from China come to learn with him and work in his clinic, and then take his knowledge back. He's amazing. So any sort of autoimmune condition, he looks at both the orthodox view and then marries that with the he doesn't with the traditional or with the
Yes.
so he doesn't. He's able to work within both arenas, if you like.
Yeah.
Although um, he doesn't prescribe orthodox allopathic medicines, but he will take. If you come with a particular condition and you've been through the hospital system, if you bring your notes and you bring your whatever
Yeah.
diagnoses with you, then he can or one of his team,
Interpret it. Yeah.
he has various members,
So as an integrated approach, really.
yeah, with him. And I mean, hands down, I have to say, most amazing. It's expensive though, unfortunately,
Yeah.
with herbs and all
It's
and the whole.
time in preparation, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And he's is very slick. He's in Hove. Hove is quite a kind of affluent part, sort of just butts up against Brighton.
Mm.
But it's a bit like, some of it looks a bit like South Kensington.
Right.
You
Okay.
know, it's big houses and avenues and stuff like that. But yeah, but regardless, it's uh, very good. And actually, the person who first said I should go and see him when I was living in London years ago, and I was having some treatment with what's his name, John Tyndall. You
Oh,
remember John Tyndall, the crazy
yeah, yeah.
kind of martial arts
My God, yeah. I haven't had
maverick.
15 years, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and
Doing multiple, he was doing some kind of clinic, wasn't he? He was doing,
he's a maverick.
yeah,
He's definitely a product of the sort of 80s and 90s. He was one of the first people that would openly treat AIDS and HIV
yeah.
people. He ran street clinics for homeless people, and that's how he sort of made his name. He's a maverick. His thing was to upset the status quo. Really, he quite liked upsetting all this kind of acupuncture schools and traditional herbalists, and
Okay.
more recently he got very much into sort of shamanic practices
Yeah.
from South America and ayahuasca and running sweat lodges, and he was also got very well known here for he pioneered auricular acupuncture and
Yes, I
taught
remember.
very simple, not simple, but short courses for people who didn't have a background in Chinese medicine, that then they would be able to uh, treat people with whether you think that's good or bad, but with auricular acupuncture. And certainly one of my friends who then actually went on to train as a full acupuncturist and do the whole thing. Um, he used to go and treat people in prisons with addict. Mainly, it was like things, addictions that
Mm,
seemed to be focused on.
mm.
Yeah, John, quite a character, very quite difficult character. I think he can definitely rub you up the wrong way,
Yeah.
but like a lot of the pioneers, I think they have to have a high level of self belief. The ones that are kind of forging the path. There are others that kind of come along and sort of spread out in a more gentle way, but there are those ones that they go, I'm going to
Yeah, yeah,
I'm taking on the status quo.
yeah, yeah. But he
Yeah,
battled his way through that one. I remember.
yeah, yeah,
Maybe he used to give these seminars where he just jumped off the plane from Peru and he was still half undressed, kind of thing, and
yeah,
used to pride himself in doing everything to the absolute extreme.
yeah. And
Um,
definitely not a balanced individual. He had various scandals with him, had affairs with his students. He'd had
yeah,
lots of
yeah, yeah,
kids, and that he wasn't all of that stuff.
yeah,
So kind of classic, really, of that time. Um,
yeah.
but to go back to what you were asking about coming over, I think so. My uh, probably I can send you dates where I don't have clinic. That for if we're talking about kind of weekends, sort of rough Friday to Monday. I think probably well, summer's probably not a great time, but sort of late summer, early autumn, September, October time. I don't know what you, or November, December. It could be any of those months really. It's just the training finishes in November. It's roughly one weekend a month that it takes out, and then I do have the odd bits around the edges, but
right.
So weekends are quite definitely doable.
Okay.
Even if it's a long weekend.
We could do. There's a couple of things we could do. I can speak to there's colleagues in Cork that would be interested in doing a Qigong intro or something, and then we could do. There's a guy I know, Greg, who's I mean it's all the way down in Kerry, which is a long way to go, but there was a possibility of starting something there.
Oh yeah.
I don't mind maybe coming over to you for just one and doing something with your crew just for a bit of fun, just to do something a bit different, maybe show some things that I've picked up. So there are options there. But I think I'd like to go maybe explore what is possible next year, go a bit deeper into those realms of giving something that they can work with, that it helps them progress, because there is a little bit here. We've been a little bit saturated with Asian teachers, and so people in Ireland have really only showing up for the Asian dudes. They're not showing up so much for the Westerners.
Yeah.
As you say, with the system you've created, that can be packaged. It's like for us, it's based on this wisdom, but packaged for the majority of people. But not that it should be like that. I mean, like the guy there, or when I know he's traveling around and teaching. There's a lot more collaborations in the workshops now between the different teachers, and it's challenging unless you're like Bruce Francis, or you're super famous already. Then it can be a challenge to introduce something new. But I think we'll start with dates and then see what dates are doable. You here, you going there, whatever works for you. I would like to brush up on a couple of things that I've lost contact with from our training when you were showing me some of the forms. So that would be good for me personally.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, what I was thinking, while you were talking, actually, I was thinking what I think would be really great, because I think we both have, built we have a lot of experience in terms of time, and also knowledge accumulated over that time.
yeah,
So it would be great to, have a couple of these conversations where we kind of focus things in a bit more on sort of creating a training, really.
okay,
That because I think it's great to go in and do a sort of hit and do a kind of retreat type thing in a very general sense, because there's a benefit in that. But equally, that it would be nice to have something that's a bit more structured. And as you know, I'm a bit destructured, so I'm a bit kind of going, wide out. So for me, it's quite good to actually, collectively draw things into a bit more of a focus.
yeah.
And so it would be quite nice
we could
to work out how we could, sort of
we
do
could
it together.
look at just saying like what's the vision of how
Yeah.
deliver?
Because for me, I had this conversation with one of my students who's now, just started teaching on training, I've sort of drawn her in, and she's very much like qigong, 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 you know, and 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 I was saying, you know, for me, the training is not really about teaching people qigong. That's a vehicle in this
Yeah,
context.
I know where you're going
It's
with
about, you know, it's a bit
it.
wider than that. It's kind of being able to, well, take your power, develop as an individual, as a human being. It's having a kind of wider context and not getting drawn into these lines where it's very much like so and so said it's like this, so that's it. It's a narrow pathway, you know, and I think I don't know about you. I have quite a lot of trouble. It sort of comes and goes in waves from the what do they call themselves? Shaolin Qigong group. I think it's headed by a kind of Malaysian Chinese. In
Oh,
fact,
the guys in Germany. I can tell you some stories.
well, there and he, you know, they've had a few run-ins with them where they sort of have come to my trainings or my workshops.
Mm.
They sent various things, not introduce themselves, which I think is kind of a bit rude. Always run away at the end of the session
Mm.
before I can actually, you know, just have a chat with them, just to, you know.
Yeah.
And they go, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? They're like, you know, and it's sort of semi undermining, but also picking my brains.
Yeah.
Because their system is one of those
Well,
systems.
the head of that school, Sheng Yi, or whatever his name
Yeah.
is, I'll send you a video. I don't care if he's listening to this, but I'll send you a video of one of my teachers schooling him.
Right.
And now he, unfortunately, I think got involved with a particular character.
Yeah.
You probably know the guy I'm talking about. I'll give you a clue.
Okay. Yeah.
Or
Yeah. Yeah.
likes to wear very skimpy clothing
Yeah.
and dresses himself up as some god.
Mm.
And this guy got infiltrated, and I think with a huge level of coercion, narcissism, and bullying,
Mm.
convinced your man that he was greater and more supreme than
Mm.
himself, and pretty much destroyed that college. It was
Mm.
down to its bare bones.
Mm.
And I do believe through consistent uh, arrival of one of the guys that's been teaching me of him just showing up and being soft and being more gentle and
Mm.
being more practical and
Mm.
dispelling the illusion over internal power
Mm.
and just that loving kindness
Mm.
managed to nurture the whole thing back. But
Mm. That's amazing.
I'm always a bit concerned when a monk wants to appear on Diary of the CEO or
Mm.
wants to appear on big platforms. It's there's something missing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Need for recognition.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
one of the particular masters I train with, he's just like, "Should we do this?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, let's go, let's do it." There's none of this. Oh, I said, "Look, I've only like 750 followers, or yeah, it doesn't matter. Let's just do it. Let's just put it out there." It's
Yeah.
like hierarchy of who he can talk
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I know I don't deny the fact that he's an inspirational figure. He's helped a lot of people, probably. There's people I know here that have trained directly with him, and
Mm.
they love him and they think he's great.
Mm.
Um, and I think his heart is in the right place, and he
Mm.
definitely speaks very well.
Mm.
Uh, for me, I feel like it's acting.
Mm. Mm.
It's a great
Acting role. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's acting
Yeah.
the role.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any of the real monks I've ever trained with say bugger all.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
show you that much. Don't
Yeah.
care to show you that much because
Yeah.
you're not there. You're not a true monk. You're not part of their monk lineage. You're
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
else.
Well,
As a
these people that come to me, I mean, I don't think they are directly sent by him, but I think they come with that.
yeah,
They never declare themselves, but it's always to sort of pick my brain. They're always super rude, you know.
they want to belong to something.
Yeah,
And a
yeah,
lot of them actually only train online. A lot of them don't actually even go to the temple.
yeah.
It's a farmhouse. It's a farmhouse in Germany that was
You're right. Okay.
probably heavily funded by
Mm,
some sort of Tibetan
mm.
or
Yeah,
possibly
yeah,
Shaolin temple
yeah,
fund. I
yeah.
know a couple of the guys in Manchester and one, I think, in London, they nearly lost their
Mm.
temple, you know,
Okay.
COVID and all that sort of
Yeah,
malarkey. So,
yeah.
and I trained with Orwin, and he said, like, you have to be very careful which Tibetans you align yourself with sometimes because
Mm.
some of them are hugely cultish and
Yeah,
very
yeah. Well, that's the danger, isn't it? That's the
usually not because they have a big, massive temple with gold and stuff
yeah,
on the roof, and they're very, very wealthy. And he said, that's the one
yeah,
you got
yeah.
to be
Exactly. The power of bling.
parapling. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyway, I'm going
Yes, dude. Yeah, I think it's
an
God.
hour
Yeah,
and a half. That's amazing.
I know it goes like that, doesn't it? But
So,
let's have a little think. We're both in. Have a little think. Have another one of these chats, and
yeah,
then we start to. And then and also if you do want to do a bit of training, we'll we can look at
yeah,
that
no problem.
and
Yeah,
maybe maybe even it might be possible if I can pop over there and we can do some in person for a weekend or something. Just play
yeah,
around.
yeah.
It'd be
Usually,
quite good.
there's a lot of places here we can go to and go to sacred places we can go and train and
Yeah,
all.
yeah, always. Yeah,
Um, yeah, it's just some things I need to polish up that just
yeah. But it'd be quite good. It'd be quite good to actually have that kind of. We can do so much online, and it's great to chat, and we can organise stuff and all of that. But
yeah.
it's quite good to actually do the in
Just
person.
if you could send me ideas on a curriculum that you have in mind,
Yeah,
and I could see does anything that I have any relevance and can plug into
yeah,
that content.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Cool. Yeah.
And
All right.
then,
Have a
if
think.
being honest with you,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
quality is subject to scrutiny, shall we say?
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's also it's a way you can kind of flesh things out or pull things back or okay, what's your audience? Is this kind of very general? Is it kind of really
It always
beginner?
reminds me of the time when you did ayahuasca and you said you were doing your Qigong and you said to me, this is how I always felt Qigong should have always been. And I think
Mm.
if that's the message that you got from that experience, I would say that probably that's the way we need to go is do the Qigong as you would have always imagined it to be,
Yeah, exactly.
not rely on
Yeah,
lineage. I mean,
yeah,
lineage is nice because it anchors you to
yeah.
something.
You have to respect the ancestors. This is the very
Absolutely,
wrong. You know
but
what I mean?
we're taking that information and
Mm.
repassing it
Yeah,
from.
exactly. Yeah, critical thinking.
Say hello
But,
to
hey,
Anya.
I will, of course. Yeah, you
Uh,
say hi,
Allow
she,
people
all of
behave
that.
themselves. When I see him, there will be trouble.
It's
I'm
sleep.
watching you, Doge, little Doge.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Uh, dude.
Okay.
All right. It's great to catch up, mate. We'll speak again soon. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Right, dude. I love